Hey everybody, welcome back to Church Talk, where we talk about everything involving the local church. My name is Rob, and today we're going to be talking about in-ear monitors. All right, so if you are in a band or you're on your worship team and you guys are thinking about making the transition over to in-ear monitors, you want to watch the rest of this video. I'm going to be sharing with you guys some of the differences and some of the pros and some of the cons about using in-ears. Now, we just made the transition over to in-ears at our church about a year ago. I started worship pastoring there about at that time, and when I first started, we had no in-ears, and we used no in-ears for probably the first couple of months, and then we made the transition and took our monitors off the stage. So before that, we traveled around and we went to many different churches. Some had monitors, some had in-ears. Before that, we were not using in-ears at all. We were able to get our musicians on in-ears, but our system wasn't set up for it. So I have a different video on that about how you can use in-ears when your system's not designed for it. I'll put that link in the description. But today's video, we're just going to be talking about making the transition over. If you have a system that's designed for it and you just haven't went that direction yet, and now you're wanting to, this is your video. So what you can expect. Number one, there are some differences with your in-ears than in wedges, and in-ear monitors will drastically reduce the sound levels of your stage if they're done properly, and also will help you not to have hearing loss if everything is done correctly. Of course, you can still put those in-ears in and crank it up to where you're going to have ear fatigue anyway, but if everything is done correctly and the levels are where they need to be and you have the right in-ears, then you're going to be able to hear just fine, hear much better, and save your hearing in the long run. Now, some of that boils down to what in-ears you actually get. We'll talk about that in just a moment. Something else that the in-ear will definitely help with is it will help your sound tech mix your mix so much better, because they're not going to be dealing with the echo or anything of the monitors. A lot of times a monitor will shoot out at you, will hit the front of the wall of the stage and echo back and create some major problems with sound. And as we get into larger churches, we don't see that so much. A lot of times the large church is almost, it's designed with sound in mind, but many times our small to mid-sized churches, they're not designed with sound systems in mind. They're just not. So when we add them, we end up having some issues that we have to deal with. And that's one way that you can reduce that sound, is by transitioning over to using in-ear monitors rather than wedges. The other thing that an in-ear will allow you to do is the use of clicks and guides. If you want to use clicks and guides, I have another video on that. I don't like them. Clicks I'm not so much about, but guides and things like that, I'm not a fan of them. But everybody's different. Some people like them, some people don't. I'm on the side of don't, but if you like them, then use them. There's nothing inherently wrong there. But if you transition over to an in-ear, that will allow you to use those tools if you prefer. The other thing that an in-ear does, it isolates you from the room. That can be a good thing and it can be a bad thing. If you are a drummer, then you want that isolation. You don't want, you want hearing protection as well as a monitor. So when you go into a drum cage, those drum cages are extremely loud. The drums are just a loud instrument, and then when we just enclose them like that, they seem like they get louder. Even if the room itself is treated acoustically as it should be, they're still really loud because there's no real place for it to go. It's right there. So your drummer needs hearing protection as well. So if you get the isolating type of in-ear monitors that have a good fit in your ear, that will help your drummer not lose their hearing while they're in that isolation booth. But if you were like me and you want to hear other things on the stage, you want to hear the people, the ones that I use are by Westone, and they allow ambient noise to pass through them. Now it still blocks a lot of it, and when everything's going on and I have music coming through them, you really can't hear if someone's talking to you beside you because the music is louder than that. But with nothing really going on yet, and we're just standing there on the platform and we're waiting on service to start or whatever, my ears are in, our pastor comes up and says something in my ear, I can usually hear him. Sometimes I'll pop it out anyway because I want to make sure that I hear correctly, but it does allow, especially if I hear my name, I'm not so isolated that I can't hear something that happens that's not in the in-ear, that's not in the mix. So you can get different types of in-ear monitors that allow that ambient noise to pass through them. Now, one thing to take into consideration when you make that switch, when you first make the switch, it's going to be a little bit difficult because you're going to feel like you're not even in the room. You're going to feel like you're totally separate. It kind of isolates you, even with those ambient pass-through type that I'm using. You still feel like you're in a different space. Something that can definitely help with that is to make sure that you have some audience mics or congregation mics that's picking up the congregation and putting them into your in-ear mix so that you can hear through your in-ears what's going on in the congregation. But that doesn't fix it completely because it's just different. It's a different feel. You just have to get used to it. But you can feel like you're not even present. And that's one of the drawbacks, one thing that you have to get used to about using in-ear monitors. And right along with that, it can become a little bit more difficult to play the room. Now, when I was a lead guitarist, we used wedges. I say a lot of the time, I won't say most, but I'll say a lot of the time, I could hear my guitar coming from the speakers. Now, the church that I grew up in, we had some, I'll say grew up, the church where I started playing lead guitar mostly, we had some R2-D2 looking speakers up in the middle of the room. When the church was built, the people that built the church, they said, "Oh yeah, you're going to love these speakers. These are great." And people would always ask, "What are those things?" They're round looking, just look like a ball up there in the middle of the room. So I could hear myself from hear my guitar coming from those speakers because they were like a 360 speaker, and they're great for like speaking. But we ended up having to put some different speakers up for our music, some directional speakers. But even with that, I could still hear my lead guitar coming back at me. And a lot of times I wouldn't need for my electric to be so loud in the monitor because I could hear it from there. And I would be able to play the room. I could tell when I got stronger that it would naturally get stronger when I needed to play lighter. I could hear it relative to the room itself. But now when we move into an in-ear, you take that away. So when you play dynamically to what you're hearing in the room, you don't have that anymore. Now you're playing to what only you're hearing in your in-ear, and you have to rely and trust your sound tech that they are going to turn you up and down in the house mix. So if you don't have a strong sound tech that you can trust that's going to be mixing everything in real time, they're just kind of monitoring for, singers and vocalists and they're trying to make sure everything sounds okay, but they're really not a mix technician. They're just kind of, they're a volunteer that's just there. If there's a squeal or something, they try to fix it. Then really an in-ear monitor may not be the right choice for you, especially if you are a worship leader and you kind of have to set everything for your sound tech, and then that volunteer, like I say, they're just there to make sure nothing squeals, nothing goes crazy. You may not want to switch over that, because if you're on the platform and you're kind of monitoring how things are sounding out there, and your monitor is just enough to where you can hear so that you're on key and you're trying to listen to what's going on in the house, it's going to become extremely difficult for you to monitor what's going on in the house while using an in-ear monitor as well. So that may not be the right decision to transition over to an in-ear at that moment. But if you have a sound tech that you can trust and that they are running, and you don't have to run sound from the platform, then yeah, you can definitely make that transition. The other thing is, especially if you are a keyboard player and you're playing supposedly underneath of the pastor or the speaker while they're speaking, it's very easy to play right over top of them, because sometimes you may not have them in your mix in your in-ear quite as loud as what you need to, or you may have them louder to make sure that you can hear them. And so you're playing according to what you're hearing in your ear. So if you have the pastor louder and you think you're playing underneath of them, but in reality, you're playing right over top of them in the house mix, it's easy to do that. And if you don't have, once again, it goes back to that sound tech. If you don't have a sound tech that's on top of it, that's going to adjust your volume and place you underneath of your pastor, it's a little bit more difficult. You may want to take an in-ear out. Many times, if I go up to the keyboard and play keys, like especially for like the altar, I would just put one in-ear in so I can make sure that I hear myself well, but I'm monitoring from the other ear, making sure that I'm underneath of the pastor in the mains. Now, it doesn't sound very good to this ear because I'm behind the speakers. I'm not really but I can still monitor, is my keyboard underneath of him or am I playing over top of him? And so that's something that you need to be mindful of. And sometimes I've been in some churches to where, we only have a certain amount of channels on a P16 or an Aviom. Usually it's 16 channels, and they may be completely full. Now, you can put multiple things in one channel, but that sometimes becomes a little bit difficult to mix. But with that comes a problem of when you get over 16 channels, you may have a couple speaker mics that's not in your P16, or it's not in your Avion. So you have a speaker that comes up and they're talking and you don't hear them at all, and you're just playing right over top of them talking, and they're talking to the congregation. They don't realize that you don't hear them. And so there can be a conflict there to where you continue to play and you're continuing to push forward in the music, and you have someone who's trying to speak to the congregation about something, and the two things are colliding. And even if your sound tech is on it and they bring everything down and bring that person up, if your eyes are closed and you don't realize what's going on, that can be really bad. But then again, that opens up to what we're going to be talking about on a different video, is when you move into in-ears, it allows you to the use of talkback mics. And with that talkback mic, at that point, somebody can say, hey, so-and-so is coming up to speak right now. And then, okay, we see them. We begin to bring things down to the level. But if they're not in our ears, we don't know what they're saying. So that's one of the drawbacks. We want to make sure that you have every single microphone is somehow going into your in-ear, because there's nothing worse than, well, I hate to say there's nothing worse. There's all kind of things worse, but there's nothing worse in the context of a service that somebody is speaking and you have no idea what they're saying, especially if they're talking to you and they're giving you some instruction like, hey, band, play this or do that. And you have no clue what they're saying. And so you're playing something complete and you're not flowing well together, and it creates confusion. So in your in-ear, make certain that you have every single microphone routed into your in-ear, and that you can hear what speakers are saying and hear what people are saying to you. So I hope you guys got some value out of this video about in-ear monitors. There's so much more that we could talk about, but I don't want to take up a ton of time. I just wanted to point out these few differences that you will face when you make the transition to in-ear monitors. There's so many pros and cons, and I think that there's many more pros than there are cons. You just have to figure out what is the best way for you to be able to hear everything, and how to mix those in-ears and so forth. I'll make another video on that, of how to mix your in-ears. If you don't have P16s are self-explanatory, or Avioms. They're very simple to use. But if you're making the transition over and you don't have the budget yet to do a P16, I'll make another video on that, because it can get pretty expensive when you make that transition over to using in-ear monitors. But if this video has been valuable to you, make sure that you hit the like, and if you haven't already, hit the subscribe button, and head over to robandjen.com/church talk. But there you will find our t-shirts and mugs and all those new traveling cups and hats and all those type of things that we have available. If you want to pick something up, it is there for you to purchase. And guys, we will see you guys next time on Church Talk. God bless.